Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Polk County Schools, I want to say thank you for being here tonight. We certainly appreciate your presence. Part of what we wanted to try to do this evening is to have a time for you to receive some information and some information on resources over three basic topics. Again, our goal tonight is awareness, and it's also to connect you with resources out there. Earlier this summer, when we had our administrators retreat, we do that every year as we get ready for the next school year. And we talk about the biggest issues that confront our administrators and our teachers and our school staff members. And these three topics come up on a regular basis. And I will tell you it's probably in the order we've listed them, with vaping being a relatively new, electronic cigarettes being a relatively new issue. We've always had smoking in the bathroom. I think you guys know that. Teenagers and people like that are going to experiment a little bit. Vaping, in terms of how it can be secretive and kind of hidden, is alarming. And also the fact that you really have no clue what's in the different juice and vape things that are out there. So we want to make sure you guys are educated on that. A step up the ladder, we've been dealing with it for a little bit longer, and I would argue the consequences are even more serious, is social media and internet safety. These days, the young people that you love have these phones on them and they can't get away from them. And so if they have somebody who's sending them mean things, or somebody entices them to send them something inappropriate, a lot of times kids get caught up in wanting to be accepted and wanting to participate in that. So we want to make you aware of what's out there. I can tell you we had a presentation for our teachers a couple years back, and they were shocked at what they didn't know about things like Snapchat and the things that your kids are on. So young people, I'm sorry, we're going to take the veil off of that tonight for your parents and family members. And then last but not least, probably one of the most alarming things to me as somebody who really cares about kids and about our community, is the mental wellness aspect of what we're seeing in our schools. Our kids are extremely anxious. They are encountering a lot more than we ever did when we were growing up, and I think there's less support and less outlets for them. So we really want to bring attention to mental health, mental wellness, and even something as simple as doing a mental health check on your child on a regular basis. So we've got some great people here to talk to you tonight. We'll bring them up in just a few minutes, but Brandon Schweitzer will lead our conversation on vaping and e-cigarettes, and we're fortunate to have Sergeant Pam Cannon with the Polk County Sheriff's Department here with us to participate in that discussion. Todd Murphy, our Polk County Middle Principal, will lead our social media and internet safety presentation, and we have another specialist from the NCSBI, Mr. Chris Campbell, who's kind enough to join us tonight and give us some information on that wonderful world. And then finally, I will be leading the presentation on youth mental wellness, and Ms. Linda Davidson from Blue Ridge Health will be here to talk about both the symptoms and warning signs and also the resources. We'll try to get it done in a quick way and get you out of here as soon as we can, but again, we really appreciate you being here, and I apologize. If you feel lonely, you're welcome to gather up into one bunch and do that, but please communicate to family and friends and people out there that you know that may not be here tonight, that we are going to videotape these sessions, and that'll be available online in terms of a link as we go forward towards the end of the week or the first of next week. We really just want the information to get out there, and so we appreciate your participation and your help with that. Without further ado, I'd like to get us started so we can stay on track. Would you please welcome Dr. Brandon Schweitzer to the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'd like to echo Mr. Green's sentiments by thanking everybody for attending tonight. I'm going to switch over to a mobile mic. I've got a little bit of presenter's ADHD, so I can move around a little bit. I'm Dr. Brandon Schweitzer, I'm the principal here at Polk County High School. Very fortunate to have that position to work with young people every day. And I think Mr. Green hit on the head when he talked about, in terms of the order of the things that we're facing. Vaping is sort of the low item on the totem pole, so to speak, but it is prevalent, pervasive across our school system and every school system you go to. What's unique about my conversations with colleagues when I talk to fellow principals is everybody is battling and dealing with the same situation we are. Things are just a little bit lower on the scale in Polk County than they are compared to a lot of places. But nonetheless, they are here. It is absolutely a part of teen cultural fabric nowadays, and the unfortunate reality of what we face when we talk about items like vaping is we get into things like headlines like this. Headlines like this. And these are just a few that I pulled, just doing a quick search, and if you'll take note of the dates that you see on some of these as we're moving forward. These are relatively recent items. Things like popcorn lung, some of the illnesses and some of the things that are actually associated with what we're finding out that vaping actually does to your body. Interestingly enough, and I'm an old history teacher, so I'm always fascinated by about the way historical trends move. If you think about going all the way back to the 80s and the big push by the federal government and the anti-tobacco campaigns, a lot of the tactics that were used to communicate with young people at that time were fear-based tactics. There were a lot of, if you smoke, then this will happen to you. Here's an example of, here's a smoker laid up in a hospital and, having double lung transplants. It's ironic that we're seeing the same kinds of things already again. And these fear-based tactics. What we've learned is culture and society have changed a little bit, and students today, young people today, do not respond to the fear-based tactics the way, quite frankly, we did. It's a whole different way of communicating with young people in terms of how you get this messaging across. The emerging research that's out there among universities and the CDC and the FDA and all these major government organizations that are trying to really communicate with young people and figure out how they're taking in their advertising, how they're making the choices they're making, what influences their decisions, what doesn't, all those kinds of things, all point to the same answers. It's not really about scaring them to death. But our natural instinct as parents, I'm a parent myself, is to go right to this conversation about, look what will happen to you if this thing goes on. And I want to urge you tonight, part of my messaging as we're talking about this is I have learned that is really not the most effective way to go about it. I want to try to supply you with some ways and means to maybe go at this conversation in a little more productive way. So, of course, after I just said that, I'm going to lead off with some CDC statistics, because I think these are good things to have in your back pocket to just know as you engage in this conversation. But I'm going to encourage you not to lead off with these if you're going to talk to your teenager about it. So the very first one is, as of November, literally November of last month, reported to the Centers for Disease Control, 2,290 cases of some type of illness related to vaping reported in the United States, and 47 deaths. I think it's fascinating. The prevailing message when you talk to young people today is that vaping is harmless. And they will tell you that over and over again. It's harmless. There's nothing that can happen to me. It's just water vapor. Now, they are nothing more than a product of advertising that's been targeted at them. If you think about and look at the ads that are out there by these companies and what they're putting out, that is the messaging that's being pushed. Some would argue it's targeting directly at teenagers. Now, obviously, that part's illegal, and there's already lawsuits that exist about states that are suing major manufacturers, like Juul, for example, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, for marketing directly to teens. I'm going to talk about, you see in your handout that you cannot purchase these devices unless you're of legal age at 18 years old, but nonetheless, they are prevalent and pervasive all throughout schools and among our teenagers. All right. So when you get into some of the known risks found in e-cigarettes, these are just a few of the items that are in it. The first one's nicotine. Nicotine has been beat to death. People know that nicotine is an addictive chemical. There's tons of research that is out there that surrounds what it does to brain development, all those kinds of things. This is actually carryover from the anti-tobacco movements that happened in the 1980s. So this part is actually relatively well known about the effects of nicotine. The difference is this: the amounts of nicotine, the composition that's actually in a lot of these vape products now, are much higher than what you would get smoking 1 or even 2 cigarettes. The concentrations are at a much higher dose. Therefore, when you're getting that kind of rapid intake, it's having a little bit more profound impact on this young person's brain development and their health. Ultrafine particles that can be held deep into the lungs, flavorings like diacetyl, chemical linked to serious lung disease, volatile organic compounds, and cancer-causing chemicals. And the last one is one that when I was talking to young people at the start of this school year, I was talking about why we as a school system are taking a more directed stance in dealing with vaping. This is actually one that kind of resonated with me. I went back to my history teacher roots and I said, look, if I stand in front of you and tell you how evil vaping is and all the things that are wrong with it and how it's going to kill you, you're not going to listen to me. But listen to me on this. Think about it from a manufacturer's standpoint. If I manufacture a vape pen and I can make it for $5 and I can sell it in the United States for $10, it's a pretty good profit. If I can farm that same manufacturing process out overseas and manufacture that same product for 25 cents and bring it back to the United States and sell for $10, that's an even better profit. And the kids all look at me and go, I can understand that part. Well, when it goes overseas, it's unregulated. They use all kinds of different manufacturing processes. They use different chemicals. That little coil that's inside that vape pen that heats up to the ultra high temperatures that actually atomizes or vaporizes the liquid, has got chemicals like nickel and tin and lead. Folks, these are the kinds of things we use to galvanize nails to make sure they don't rust. And so when I'm making comments like that to these kids and I say, That's what's heating up, and that's what's breaking loose. We're farming these products out to the lowest bidder, and you're inhaling it in your lungs. And suddenly kids are looking at me like, whoa, whoa. Like these kinds of conversations start to resonate with them. Not the conversation about, look at all the chemicals in this and how it's going to hurt you. Does that make sense? So this is part of how we're changing the narrative and changing the dialogue and talking about what's going on with these things. I also want to take a step back and say this. This conversation that we're having tonight is being had all across our country. It is not anything new, and all across our country, scientists and people that are researching this are very early in the process of trying to figure out what are the real long-term effects of what vaping looks like. I've talked to a lot of healthcare professionals. I've talked to a lot of people that are sort of on the bleeding edge of, what does this mean for you in the long term? And they'll look at you and they'll say, really, we don't really know enough. We do know that it's harmful. And if you dig through the CDC and the FDA, they'll tell you these are the number of cases. And they'll tell you these are the deaths associated, and we see some definite links. But we haven't really dug into all the various things that go on with this. The problem is, while we're still trying to catch up and figuring out what this does to your body, meanwhile, these manufacturers are just pounding advertising to kids and to everybody else. And I went ahead and said, I feel like it is kind of marketed to young people and to different places. When you offer literally 150 different flavors, I'm not sure why adults need that many different flavors. When you've got flavors like bubblegum and berry and stuff like that, I feel like that's pretty blatantly targeting young people in terms of what you're trying to do. So until we see the outcomes of some of these lawsuits and until we see how some of these things play out, it'll be interesting to see where this heads in terms of the direction. So I wanted to lead off just talking about some of the scary stuff. And this is the most text you'll see on the slide tonight. So I'm going to turn things over for just a second to Sergeant Pam Cannon, because one of the things she's going to talk about that she sees with the Sheriff's Office is a conversation we have with kids about, kids think that this is just water vapor. Or, worst case scenario, it has nicotine in it. There's much other nefarious and worse things that we're actually finding in these vape devices over time that are becoming more and more prevalent across our country. And I'm going to have Sergeant Cannon talk a little bit about what kinds of things can appear in these vape devices.
Thank you. How's everyone doing tonight? I appreciate y'all coming out. It's very important that you parents are here and some of y'all brought your kids. Again, my name is Pam Cannon, and I work with the Polk County Sheriff's Department. I'll give you a quick little history. I started in January of this year to work with Sheriff Tim Wright, but I came originally from Henderson County. So I started my law enforcement career in 1998, and I've been working and advocating for children for a long time. I'm a detective at the Sheriff's Department, and one of my specialties is child abuse. So I take serious these vape pens. I see it as child abuse, okay? I have worked with our drug detectives. I have been there when we're kicking in doors and doing search warrants. And we're finding that little gooey stuff you see in the center of the screen. That's what they call wax or dab. That is pulled from the cannabis leaf of marijuana. We have found it in freezers in Polk County. It is being put into dab pens, and where years ago marijuana joint had 20 to 30% THC, that is a concentration of 90%. So when a child smokes a dab pen that has that wax in it, or the liquid form of it, they're smoking 90% THC, which is equivalent to 15 to 20 marijuana joints in one hit. So I want y'all to think about how serious that is, and we have found it here in Polk County. I have taken dab pens out of homes with teenagers here in Polk County, and it breaks my heart because a lot of parents aren't aware of what they are. I pulled one out of a closet of a young girl, and the grandmother was standing there. She goes, "What's that?" She didn't know. She absolutely didn't know. Yes, ma'am. It is a vapor. It looks like a very slender, almost pen size. It's a smoking device. It is part of the market, and I think Dr. Schweitzer's got some examples he's going to show you all, because these units that these kids are smoking, they don't give off a big cloud like you would see with a cigarette. Some of them have very little cloud. Some of them don't have any odor to them. Or you may pass by your child and the odor you're going to pick up smells like bubble gum. They're disguised. And they're disguised on purpose. A lot of kids will pull on that vapor and then they'll blow it into their shirt, which filters the little tiny bit of smoke that can come off of them, and it's very hard to distinguish it. And then you'll get like a fruity smell, like, oh yeah, they just had a bowl of Cheerios. No, they didn't. They were in their vaping. So there's all different types of terminology. There is a whole glossary of terms for vaping now. There's the dab, also called carts. They have this whole lingo. They have it 701. 701 is a code for kids. And if you turn 701 upside down, it spells oil. It's amazing the way this is marketed, as Dr. Schweitzer said. So a couple things that I want parents to be aware of is that, yes, the tobacco age is 18. It goes with the vapor units that are being sold in grocery stores and the gas stations. The Sheriff's Department is focusing on getting out there to these gas stations and letting them know they will be penalized if they are not carding. Greensboro, North Carolina, not too far from here, I think everyone will agree, right? Hour, 2 hours away. 199 violations last year alone of selling to underage kids. 199. One of the biggest violators was Food Lion. And out of all the violations that came in Greensboro, Food Lion's the only one that stood up and said, you're right, we're wrong, and we've got to improve. We've got to start carding kids. I think the age should be moved to 21 like it is with alcohol. 18's too close. But we're going to have to work on that with our legislators, and we're going to have to watch what our children are doing. The other problem is that you can go online, and I ask you, I beg you, when you get home tonight, and you've got a few minutes of quiet time, go on your computer, pull up Juul, pull up Vaping, and you're going to see websites where you can order this online. Now, how do they card you online? They ask you to check a box that says, yes, I agree, I'm over 18. Do you think that's easy for somebody to check and then order whatever they want? It is. And that's the scary part. The United States Postal Service has just started a campaign, and it's part of being able to allow parents to watch what kids are ordering. So I ask you also, go to the United States Postal Service website, and it's an actual icon that you can click on, and it allows you to check and register your address. So anything that comes delivered through the United States Postal Service, you as a parent can get an alert on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and it will show you the return address. So if your child is ordering this online and you see a return address of Giant Vape or 80V or Juul, you know that they're ordering these vapor products. And all they did was check a box that says, yes, I'm 18. They don't have to show an ID. It's not the same as at the stores. And then we've got the problem of the older people buying it for the younger kids. But I'm asking your help with the Sheriff's Department. We're working very hard to keep the THC, the dab, the wax, the oil out of the kids, and think about that. Let it set in. One hit is equivalent to 15 to 20 marijuana cigarettes. One hit. And then once a kid gets that high, do you think they want more? Yeah, they do. So like I said, I've been in on the search warrants. I've been when we're kicking doors down here in Polk County. We're trying our best to get the meth, but we're finding the wax, we're finding the carts, we're finding the dabs. They're hidden in freezers. So we're doing what we can. We're going to improve. We're going to do more. But again, think about this, and I'll leave you with this before I turn it back over to Dr. Schweitzer. Everybody's seen those little packets of sugar in restaurants? Sweet and low? An average amount in that packet is 4 grams. 4.25 grams. So just a little smidge over that package of sugar takes that wax or that dab and now makes it a felony. So the amount I pulled out of that young girl's closet, by pulling 4 dab pins out, was felony amount. And I don't want to see these kids get hit with felonies, okay? So please help us. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. In the state of North Carolina, and it just changed December 1st for the juvenile laws, is that under the age of 18, felony still stays the same as far as how we can charge a child. Felony means higher fine, possible jail time, possible probation, and jail time for children will be Black Mountain Juvenile Detention. We still will go through the court system of talking with juvenile services to get the petition for these charges, but it can be permanently on their record, and that's not a good start, okay? So felony amounts, you're looking at not much different than if you were dealing with cocaine. I mean, let's be real. This is high concentrate of marijuana, THC, 90%, versus the old days when a marijuana cigarette, or some of y'all referred to many years ago, joints, at maybe 15, 20%. That's incredible. So, again, if y'all have any questions, concerns, don't hesitate to contact me, the Sheriff's Department. I'll be more than happy to help y'all out. And if you have any suggestions for us, we're always open for it, okay? Thank y'all.
Thank you, Sergeant Cannon. As we wrap up here in just a second, we're going to finish up, and we want to give plenty of time for you guys to respond back. One of the best parts about this particular night is we want you guys to ask questions. So I think it's really good that some of the people here have already asked a few questions of Sergeant Cannon. And as we wrap up here, we're going to definitely open the floor for any questions you might have for the school system or for the Sheriff's Office. So all that stuff is really scary. So one of the things we're getting into is, what does this look like? One of the things I run into most as I'm calling families, so this terrible situation where I've caught a kid vaping in a bathroom. It's not THC or anything like that based. It's a nicotine-based vape Juul. And then I call family and I talk to them about it, and the family has no idea. The parents say, I have no idea my child even did this. I have no idea what it looks like. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to take pictures and send them things, and when parents come in and they come pick up their child, I say, hey, if you can give me just 5 seconds, I want to show you what these things look like so you can be able to look out for them. And I found a lot of times just parents have no idea. Kids have been doing it and it's been laying out on their desk in their room, and they literally thought it was a jump drive for a computer. I don't want to pretend like we in education were just on top of this from the get-go. Up until about 2 years ago, we literally had teachers in this building that thought it was a jump drive. When at first glance, it literally, in fact, it even charges like that. Plugs into a computer to charge. Little magnetic jumper that actually hooks into it, and you just set it on the jumper and it charges right up. So as we have gotten better about identifying these things, we've sort of shored up some of the loopholes and gotten that information out there down on top of it. But this is just an example of all the brands, all of the marketing. And Juul is really the one that sort of kickstarted the party with this small mobile device. I have, as we finish up here tonight, I'm going to stay around afterwards. You can't really see it over here in the shadows, but I've got an ammo can full of things that I've confiscated over the years that our assistant principals have over the last several years. And I don't want you thinking that this is just like 2 days worth. This is over several years. But what it does is I've collected a nice sort of broad sampling so that parents, when they want to come see this, I'm able to lay out a variety of different devices. Because this market is not just about these small compact ones. This one is very slender, about this tall. I mean, if you see it literally, you might not think anything of it. You see all the different varieties. Some of the other ones we see that are more common are slightly larger devices. So this one's by a company called SMOK. This one is, there's a variety of different ones that have this same body design. The reason these are more popular is because the cartridge can hold more. Actually has more liquid in it, and the kids are wanting to get more lifespan out of these. These in particular, the reason they're popular is because they are refillable. You can stop at a local vape shop or wherever and refill it with a flavor of your choice. The Juul pods are not refillable. They are a disposable pod. So you see those things even separate from one another. They're real tiny little cartridges you may not think much of when you first see them. These are particularly scary because these are the ones that you hear kids talking about carts. Hey, I'm looking for a card. A card is a cartridge that they're trying to get a hold of. Sometimes they're referring to jewel cartridges. Sometimes they're referring to these guys that are loaded with some of the more nefarious stuff, like the THC oils and those kinds of things. It's so difficult for a school system to really figure out what's in this because we don't have those drug testing kits on hand. So school systems are really taking a hardline stance on, we don't know what's in this, and that's why these punishments and the way that we're addressing a lot of this stuff is so intentional and directed. Kids that have talked to me about this have even said, buying it off the street, if you're in the market for something like a THC oil, you're not going to know if you're getting the real thing or if you're getting ripped off and getting just flavored water. And the way they're testing it on the street is they're putting it on a piece of wax paper, putting it in their freezer, and if it freezes solid, they got ripped off, it was water. If it turns into like a mushy goo, then they got THC oil of some kind. So that's how they're trying to test it on the street, just to see if they're buying the right things, those kinds of things. So as you can see, this is a pretty complex issue, and it's really evolved rapidly. And that's the point of this next slide. In just this short time period, these are national statistics. This is not Polk County statistics. And nationally, we have made this jump among high school students. 1.5% of kids in a self-reported statistic in 2011 have partaken in some type of vaping, all the way up to 27.5% of kids. 1 in 4 kids now have at least tried a vape of some kind. Folks, it's that prevalent. And one thing I've learned about this, and I'm very aware of it with my 2 daughters, this crosses all socioeconomic statuses, race, ethnicity, the whole bit. Once upon a time, I'm going to make a very generalized statement. To say, hey, those are the people that smoked, you can kind of pick them out in a crowd. It's almost like they isolated themselves over to one side. You say, oh, those are the smokers. You cannot do that with vaping. I'm telling you, it doesn't happen that way. It's everything from kids that are from really difficult home situations, all the way up to kids that are literally living in multi-million-dollar homes. It crosses all divides. So it's a whole different landscape than what we've seen in the past with tobacco. And then middle school really caught my attention. 1 in 10 middle school kids has tried this. It's moving its way down the ranks pretty well, down into younger and younger ages. So it's important to have this conversation early about what this looks like and what this means. So this leads us to my final point is, how is Polk County Schools battling back? What are we doing and what are we seeing? And one of the things I want to make sure you know is this. I told you at the start of this presentation, this fear-based tactic of saying this is what it will do to you and these are all the horrible things is not effective. What we have done as a school system is, number one, education. We're an educational institution, that's what we do. So therefore, I am tasked with, when I encounter a kid like this, to use this as a teachable moment and to say, let's talk about why you started this. Let's talk about what makes you want to engage in this activity. Let's talk about the number of friends you have that do this kind of thing. What was your reason for jumping into it in the first place? Those kinds of things. And then really working our way around some of those educational points and having two-way dialogue with kids instead of preaching at them about, here's all the horrible things it will do to you. Relationships is another key part to it. Having a good, positive relationship with our kids and having that trust level built has been just absolutely critical to having them actually open their ears and listen to us. If you haven't done so already, engage in this conversation intentionally with your kids. You wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't care about your children and have an interest in these topics that are being presented. Go directly at it and have this conversation at the dinner table. I gave you resources in a handout on the back. There's a QR code and there's a link below it. It is a really, really good article about how to start that conversation with your kids. It can be as simple as literally you pass a vape store or you see someone doing it. I was out with my daughters at a Disney event, actually, this past week, and we were going to see this Disney on Ice. And as we were walking into the Coliseum, there was somebody taking a big drag off of one of the big compartment vape pens blowing the cloud up in the air. And my daughter stops me, my 8-year-old daughter says, what are they doing? Now, I had a choice to make as a parent. I could have said, Sadie, we'll talk about that later. Or I could have said, let me tell you what's going on, why this is a conversation we need to have now. It's sad that I'm already thinking about that with an 8-year-old daughter and then a 4-year-old right behind me. So have these conversations early and be intentional about what this means and what it looks like and what it can do to you, and try to encourage them to talk and communicate with you about, hey, someone offered me this in a bathroom today, and what did that mean? How did you go about that conversation? How do you navigate situations like that where you are presented with those kinds of things? Next is behavioral deterrence. So priority one is education and building relationships, and then we move to how are we deterring this behavior? I have changed my own behavior as a high school administrator. I do not pass a men's restroom of any level in this school without going inside. So every boys' bathroom I pass, walking down the hallway or anything else, I pop inside every single time. That's a behavior I've had to change in terms of class changes, lunch, everywhere. I don't care if it's even during class, because some kids are going out to the restroom during those times. I pop in a restroom. Just the fact that they know that we as an administrative team have changed our behaviors and we're so present and in bathrooms, and teachers are starting to do the same thing, has really cut down on the amount of vaping in bathrooms and hiding in those private spaces to do this kind of thing that we see in schools. So those kind of behavioral deterrents are important. And the last thing on the list, and we put it last on purpose, but it is important, is unified expectations. If kids know what's coming, if they know that we're talking right at this and we're not dodging it, you'll see we have seen a marked response in terms of the numbers being cut down that we're seeing in schools. So what we've done with the middle school this year is we've unified our discipline code. Your first offense getting caught with a vape pen of any kind or a vape device of any kind is a 2-day suspension from school. And then when you come back, you're probably going to see a guidance counselor, and we're going to talk about what all's going on with this and why you're getting involved in it. And is this a habit? Our nurse does a fantastic job of talking to students about the healthcare angle and about what this means for your body and how you can maybe work towards quitting if you are addicted to nicotine. I mean, we take a multi-pronged approach to this, not just suspension from school. Your second offense is 5 days out of school, so it gets pretty heavy after that. On your third offense, we're talking about alternative placement. So that is a huge jump from where we've been in the past. And if you look, school systems all around us are taking these just hardline zero tolerance policies. And they're doing it, quite honestly, folks, not so much as a means of fear the rod, but more about we just have no idea what's in these things. And that's what's so scary. So we've already seen with our kids this year, because we've been so intentional and direct about our conversation, a decline in the amount of vaping that we've seen going on at the high school with just vaping-related activities. So we do believe it's having an impact. And I think that's important for you guys to hear kind of what we're doing as a school system. So before I wrap up Q&A, the last thing I want to say is this. You would think, if you've ever seen someone vape, I described to you earlier seeing the person outside the auditorium blow this big vapor cloud into the sky. The big cartridge-like devices, and I think you've got a little sort of animated version of it that's on your handout, and I've got some of this up here that we can show you here in just a minute. Those produce those big clouds. The little bitty jewel devices produce a cloud that is almost negligible, even if it's blown out in the open air. When you combine it with blowing it down into your sleeve or doing something called biking down, you pull your shirt out and blow it down in the front of your shirt, stuff like that, you literally cannot see it. I mean, I didn't believe it until I saw it done for the first time. You can find YouTube videos on it. Mr. Green's got some examples. The item he has in his left hand is one of the big container type devices. In his right hand, and you can hardly see it, that's a jewel device. So you can see how small and easily concealable these things are. It makes it really difficult in schools, to be quite frank with you, when you're trying to catch these kids and kind of stay on top of being aware of what's transpiring and being present at all times. It's a really difficult process. So it's something to kind of keep in mind in how we're going about this. You have to tackle it with a multi-pronged approach and having that good relationship with kids. So now at this time, we want to kind of open this up for questions. Again, I told you I'm going to be present afterwards with all kinds of examples of these we want to show you guys, but we really want you to ask questions of us in terms of the school's perspective on things, the sheriff's office perspective. So the floor is open. Anybody might have a question? Yes, sir.
It seems to me that something is going to come requires a fair community. Doing some rain and
Absolutely. What a great question. You could not be more accurate when you say it's a community-based effort. You want to make these kind of changes. And in the past, when we battled things, and I don't want to step on what you're going to hear from Chris Campbell here in a second, but when we battled things like on social media, we've seen our community and our parents rise to the occasion to shut down bullying, to shut down some of these sort of anonymous websites where we can anonymously sort of say hateful things about people. We've seen our community rise up to do that. We do the same kinds of things with vaping. And having that open dialogue with them is important. We've had those kinds of conversations. It's hard because they're a private entity and they're trying to make money and sell. And what they'll look at me and they'll say is, we don't sell to kids. Thank you, first of all, for not doing that. But, you know, like you said, can you not put a poster up in their front window, you know, basically saying that you have this? What you heard from Sergeant Cannon earlier is true. I spoke to Sheriff Tim Wright even earlier today about visiting our local gas stations and our local convenience stores and the grocery store and that kind of thing, and saying, hey, first of all, be sure you are carding kids and you are staying on top of who you are selling to. Sadly, I've had some instances of kids that have just walked in at 16 years old, bought a vaping device and walked right out. They get carded, nothing. We don't think about it. We haven't ingrained that in our fabric yet, where we have, say, alcohol. I still get carded for alcohol. You know, people were terrified of selling alcohol. We haven't got to that level culturally yet with things like vaping. So help us in that dialogue. You know, as parents and as community members, when you're visiting different establishments, say, hey, I've noticed you have a lot of advertising up for dual devices. How many kids come in? And you know, can you still get by with maybe not advertising quite as much? They'll be surprisingly receptive to this conversation if they hear it repeatedly among everybody, not just school residents. Great question. Go ahead, Esme. Absolutely. I think that is a great idea. And I have no excuse for why it doesn't exist other than it's just evolved so fast. I mean, this has really taken us by just kind of storm how quickly it has grown. But you're absolutely right. And that's something that I think is really good in terms of the way we need to think about how we advertise and market to kids. This year, I'll be honest with you, has been the first year that we have just gone straight at this conversation about vaping. In years past, it's been sort of a included in your rules and expectations kind of thing. We literally set aside a separate dialogue about this is the conversation we're going to have about how we go at this. So we've seen an impact. So that's another great thing that we need to add to that. Any other questions for either myself or the sheriff's office? Yes, ma'am. Sure. Sergeant Keenan, I'll let you kind of speak to it. I'll tell you from my perspective when I've seen some of these things, age plays a part in what I see. And although those rules have changed recently in terms of the juvenile age that has been raised, previously it was if you're older than 16, you're charged as an adult. So that felony all of a sudden meant a felony just like it does for you and I. And we know that that's a serious offense, potentially life-altering. So now it's going to show up on your background check when you're trying to apply for a job in all kinds of places. When you were younger than 16, it was a juvenile charge, which meant it stayed in like what's called petition status. That simply meant that the courts were aware and they were working towards resources they were pumping their way to try to alter the behavior. And if there wasn't evidence that you were sort of on the straight and narrow, it ramped up every time after that you went back to court. So then they maybe took a look at more community service. And then if that didn't show some type of change in behavior, then it went up to possible juvenile detention center. And then just kind of escalated from there. However, if the behavior dissipated or changed or something like that while under 16 in that petition, the charges kind of, I won't say went away, but they kind of declined and eventually may have been dismissed. Either way, once they aged out of that particular age, it was off the record and was never available publicly. That has now, Sergeant Cannon, I won't speak for it, that is now raised to, is it 18 years old as of December 1? So I'm going to let you speak in more detail about kind of what that impact is.
So unfortunately, the laws just kind of tied law enforcement's hands. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. But, and Chris Campbell may have a little bit more on this too from the SBI. But unless it is a violent crime between the age of 16 and 17, we cannot charge as an adult. And when I say violent crime, we're talking about the manslaughter, the rape, the murder. Correct, Chris? Everything else is now going to be handled from 16 and 17-year-olds. Even though it would be a felony, they're going to treat it as a juvenile, okay? Which means that it'll be more of the sealed records. But here's one thing that I tell kids when I come out to the schools and I talk to them. I know it's hard when you're young to plan for your future. I know that we're all invincible when we're young. We don't think about 10 years, 20 years down the road. Some aren't even thinking about college. But here's the key. We can charge you with a felony, and on the surface, these things can be sealed, but there's not a whole lot of jobs that are going to take you without an application. And that application is going to ask a question, whether they polygraph or not, which Chris is very familiar with. They're going to ask you, have you ever been charged with a felony? And are you going to be able to answer that question honestly, yes or no? It doesn't say you had to be adjudicated with a felony. It doesn't mean that you had to be found guilty of a felony. Have you ever been charged with a felony? So, unfortunately, the juvenile system kind of tied law enforcement's hands, but we will still treat it as serious as possible, and we will work with juvenile services in court, you know, because we don't want these kids going from this THC or dab or cart or vaping. We don't want them to go towards some more serious drugs either, you know, and we've got a problem here, and I'm not going to lie to you, with the methamphetamines. So we don't want that trend going, okay? Does that answer your question? Thank you.
So folks, I want to be cognizant of other presenters' time, so I don't want to continue on. I do want to let you know, if you haven't done so already, please grab one of the handouts. There's a ton of really good information on that. It's the one that's got a bunch of sort of infographics and stuff like that on it. Good information on the back. That QR code is a great resource to, you know, how to engage in this conversation with your kids. I'm going to be around after the presentation when we wrap up tonight. If you want to get your, you know, quote unquote hands on some of these devices and see them and see what we're talking about, we've got a whole variety of those available. Just be prepared, because when the oil gets on your skin, you're going to go home with a bubbly flavor on your fingers. So it's harmless. You can wash it off. So want you to be aware of that. Thank you guys for your attention, your participation tonight, and look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Green. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. I am very pleased to see some of our students with us. I think this is important for you guys to hear, as well as your parents. Next topic that we are going to cover includes social media and internet safety. So I'm not sure we have enough time to really delve into those areas, but I do think it is important for us to at least have some time to discuss some of the things, some of the pitfalls that exist in our society today. Our students, our kids, grow up in a time that we're so unfamiliar with. And I like to think of myself as not being very old. But the more I work around these students and have conversations with them, I know very little about social media. I know that the world is changing. These kids are exposed to many things, have many different pressures on them on a daily basis. And not only does that concern me as an administrator, but it concerns me as a parent of a 14-year-old girl. And so I'm very interested in hearing what Mr. Chris Campbell from the State Bureau of Investigation has to say to us tonight. So Mr. Campbell, at this time, if you'd like to come forward.
Is that working? I'm not used to carrying these, bear with me. Just make sure I don't get too close to that. Just be back like that. It's been a long time since I stood up on one of these. So my name's Chris Campbell. I'm with the State Bureau of Investigation. I'm at the Asheville office. But I've been working down here a lot. I've worked with Pamela a lot of cases that she's called me and discuss stuff. And I've worked out with Polk for years because I'm from this area. I'm actually just down the road, one county over is where my initial hometown is. But I'm now stationed at Asheville, so I'm not too far away. Traffic is decent. I'll make it down here probably a few other days. It may take a little longer. Ray, I want to say your presentation was fantastic. Listening to you talk, that was the passion you have for that. It's just phenomenal. I love to see that in our administrators, so please don't lose that. That was great to see. So thanks for the info. That actually helped me know more about that stuff from my side too. So thank you. So I've been in law enforcement for about 15 years. Started up in the county, Polk County. I've kind of floated around a little bit. I've been with the state the majority of my time. Started off, I was a field operator, working in the fields with some of the locals way out west in Cherokee County. Everybody especially the young ones in here. If you don't know where that is, drive to Tennessee, turn around. You're going up to Cherokee County. So I was stationed out there for a while. That's where eventually moved back. I'm actually a polygraph operator now. So I was talking about polygraph. I did a lot of that, a lot of interviews. And then I got into computer crimes not too long ago. So a little over a year ago, I worked with those guys. I've worked with them for years. Something I want you to understand about the internet aspect, and they pointed on it earlier, is he said, I don't know a lot about it. Folks, here's the thing, it changes every day. So for anyone to get up here and say, oh, I know all about the internet, they're kidding me. Right? Because it is constantly changing. Apps that are coming out on a constant basis. The ones that are there, then the next day they're something else. They literally are this today, and tomorrow they'll come up with some legal aspect will change, and they'll totally call it something new because there's a legal aspect of it. So they'll take it down tomorrow, and then the next day it turns into something else. So to stand up here and say, these are the apps that you need to watch out for constantly, it's going to be hard for me to pinpoint certain ones. I will give you a couple that I know that we deal with on a constant basis, but don't think those are the only ones you deal with. Now, to see the kids in here, I remember y'all, the ones of you in school, I remember being that student that had to go along with these presentations, okay? I feel for you, okay? Sit here and listen to this, because I had to do the same thing. But you know what? Understand this with your parents that brought you here. They care about you with me here, okay? They do. They want the best for you. Whether you believe it or not right now, they do, okay? And one day you'll look back and be like, wow, you know what? Mom, Dad actually cared. Right? It's impressive, because there are some out there that don't. We're very lucky. Whether you believe it or not, we're very lucky that you have parents that make you sit in this auditorium on Tuesday night, close to 8 o'clock. So take it for what it is. I'm just telling you from a parent's perspective, and also one that was there before. I remember how horrible it was, but in reality, they do care about you. So I'm going to touch some stuff that may help you all a little bit. There's also a website out there if you want a lot more information. As they said, we don't have the time to really discuss it in detail. NetSmart is ran by, we'll talk about NICMIC here in a minute, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They put this website out there. They do a great job of sending information out there for the parents, and they update it constantly. They put stuff out there. They've got all kinds of information out there, even for the classrooms. If you're a teacher, admin staff, schools, they probably see, most of them probably see it. But it's out there, free website, they have great information. Presentations are on there, just take a chance. When you get them on, take a chance to look at it. The videos that are up there, my eye on scout, you can click on this stuff for me. It's got different age groups, so depending on what your age group is you're trying to talk to, they've got different videos for that, so you just pick the one you want and go with it. We do presentations at the schools a lot. They give us one of their presentations. They have some great videos, y'all. They have a presentation that actually talks about cell phones versus internet, social media type stuff, stuff that people are doing on phones versus actually getting on the computer. They have a cyberbullying section. They do a really good job of putting all this information out there. So take some time to look at it. Don't just look at the website. Spend some time on it. Look through there, see if there's something that can actually help you. There's a lot of stuff on there for parents. So it's not just for the kids, it's for the parents. So if you get them on, you get a chance to look at it. Then you can also go to your resources there. They've got additional resources. There's presentations. They've got classroom activities for the teachers that are there, after school stuff, and of course tip sheets to kind of help you with that. So if you get a chance, that's one of the ones we really push. So talk about NICMIC for just a second, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They do a lot of stuff. If you see the pictures on, you go to Walmart, you see that section over there that nobody really wants to look at, especially on the holidays and missing since last year. They do a lot of those posters they put out there, because what happens is an officer, and probably as they'll come before, you have to call, hey, we've got a missing child, we've got a missing teen, we want to get some flyers out there. Y'all, they are phenomenal. They're like, send us pictures, send us the info, we will print the flyers for you, we will send them to you. And they say send them, y'all, they will send boxes for them at times. I remember working some cases like that. We were posting those things up, they're putting them on the internet, they're posting them all over the country. They do a really good job of getting that information out there. They keep up with us, they'll call us on a constant basis saying, hey, contacted this person now. They want to know. This isn't just let's just feed out the flyers and hope for the best. They keep up with this and want to know how things are going. So we keep up with NICMIC. With NICMIC also on the other side of the social media aspect of it. Okay, so that's where we come in as computer crimes agents. So working in the computer crimes unit, we are associated with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force stuff. So we work with a lot of local agencies on these ICAC-related stuff. ICAC-related information can also be cyberbullying. It can be anything as simple as you've got somebody who has created a fake Facebook website or a page, or they got a fake Instagram, and they're posting pictures of someone that they shouldn't be, of a friend of theirs, and we have that all the time. So it's like identity theft kind of to a degree. But they also, when we deal with this stuff, we deal with a lot of the child pornography aspect. And that is the part of the job that I don't enjoy doing. I don't like my job when it comes to that. It's not fun. But people ask me, why do you do it? It comes down to this answer. Somebody has to. Because it's becoming more and more prevalent. It is scary to know what's out there in reality. And it's not just the pictures, y'all. Me being a polygraph operator, I do a lot of interviews. I talk to a lot of people that are involved in this kind of stuff. Right? So one of the things when I talk to these people is we get them to have the photos, and people think, it's just photos, which are bad enough, right? They're bad enough. There's a report out there called the Buckley report that states that over 90% of people who have possession of these pictures have been a hands-on offender at some point in their life. Over 90%, y'all. That means over 9 out of 10 people, so almost 100% of people that have possession of these photographs have touched a child at some point, sexually at some point in their life. That's scary. But how long have they gotten away with that before we're able to actually be involved and maybe getting in there and taking them out of the situation? And on top of that, are they in their house or are they in someone else's house? Is it a family member close by? Was it 20 years ago? It comes down to it. It's a matter of how many times that happened. We don't look at it just the one incident. How many times has this happened? So we go in here and we work these cases. How this starts is this: when it comes to especially the younger kids, they don't understand necessarily how the cloud works. Right? We keep looking around for it constantly. Right? Like, where is this cloud that I'm talking about? And down the road, we've got a Facebook plant not too far from here, right? That popped up, and I've got family members that work there, and they say great things about that place. But we think, where is this cloud at? Well, here's the funny thing about stuff. Let's take one of the simple areas that people do know about: Snapchat. Okay? Everybody's heard of Snapchat, even if you've never messed with it, but you've heard of it. People assume that a Snapchat is, I take a picture, I send it, it goes from me to that person, and that's the end of it. That's not how that works. Okay? If you think that's how that works, and you're giving me this wide-eyed expression, then there may be some questions running through your mind right now, like, oh gosh, not that picture. So the way this works is this: you take a picture, you hit send, it goes to the cloud, it goes to a server somewhere. So Snapchat has a server somewhere that's holding that information. It's processed, it's sent to the other person. Now, between that relay, there are people who get paid a lot more money than me to sit in a room and look through these pictures. What are they looking for? They're looking for stuff that needs to be reported to people like them. So just because you push send does not mean that communication is going to be one other person. It's sitting somewhere on a server. And for you to think that as soon as I hit send and they open it, it disappears, it may have disappeared from their phone, it ain't disappeared in real life. It's just like they were talking about earlier about schools and stuff, and the future and stuff. That stuff gets there, y'all. There is no telling how long it stays there. It can be years that it sits there. So 5 years from now, I may get a phone call from Nick saying, hey, this picture was uploaded to Snapchat 4 years ago, and y'all need to take a look at this individual because they were 16 at the time. They may be 18, 19 now. They were 16. A 16-year-old sending a picture, any type of nudity type pictures, is automatically child pornography. So I don't care if you're 4, I don't care if you're 16, 17 years of age. Sending that picture is automatically a felony. Right? So yeah, we think some kids we get them like, oh, that's funny, it's not a big deal. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. It may not be a big deal now, but what happens when you're applying for a college, you're applying for a job 5 years from now, and all of a sudden this picture's popped up, and they're like, yeah, we got a problem now. Something happened a couple of years ago. We got to talk about this concept of what Nick is saying was posted 3 years ago to Snapchat, Instagram. Y'all, I've seen it on Etsy. Anybody know what Etsy is? This awesome website where you can see some really cool crafts. It's a great thing. But people are posting child pornography on this. And when I joined this unit, I'm like, seriously? Like there? Of all places? But y'all, they don't care. Like, people that are truly posting this stuff, it's the joy they get out of sending it out there. They don't care how they send it. Okay? Now, is that a little different than a 16-year-old sending a picture to a 16-year-old? In the grand scheme of things, possible. But is it still child pornography? Yes, it is. So the crime is in itself, it doesn't matter. The state looks at it from the standpoint of what does the law dictate the crime to? And when they say, well, it's just 2 16-year-olds having fun, they don't care. Okay? The law is the law. It's a crime. They're not going to look at the excuse and say, it's not a big deal because they're friends. That's not how it works. The law is the law. So when we go and we talk to these 16, 17-year-old kids who do this, the first thing I tell parents is this. Number one is don't lie to them. Don't lie to your kids about this stuff. Don't sit here and say, you're going to go to jail for 40 years if they catch you practicing English. Because what are they going to turn around and do the second you walk out of the room? They're going to Google that, right? And they're going to be like, no, mom was wrong. Okay? She lied to me, or they don't know what they're talking about. So one thing I tell parents is, be honest with your kids about what the repercussions are. One thing I've started doing over the last 6, 7 years is I actually started studying millennials, Z generations and stuff. I do presentations on that, on detecting conception of teens, because of the way that they have adapted information compared to what other generations have done, it's a totally different world, y'all. And one thing that I have learned is they'll catch you a lot faster than anybody else, because they literally will wait till you walk away from them and they'll Google that information. So I've witnessed it. Shoot, Alexa is smarter than me nowadays in the room, okay? So I can literally say something where my kids will be like, well, let me ask Alexa. And I'll be like, idiot if I'm wrong, right? So I'm very careful the information I give to my kids nowadays when it comes to that, right? Because they'll turn around and look it up. So what I tell parents is fine, if you're going to discuss it with them, have the option for them to say, fine, if you don't believe me, look it up. Or, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, let's look it up together, okay? Meet them in the middle, okay? There's a trust factor when it comes to this stuff. You have to, there's a give or take when it comes to this, because we can sit here as parents and say, my kids are not allowed to do this. Okay, well, maybe in front of you, but we don't know what they're going to do. It's like Kim was talking about earlier about this jewel device stuff. Their parents don't know what's going on. Okay? They don't know that the kids are doing that. Well, it's the same with cell phones. Okay? I've seen friends who have their friends when they get to school, they check my Facebook page. The only time they check it, 5 minutes before school starts. They don't have a phone. They do it that way. They're smart, y'all. They're not dumb when it comes to this stuff. They think way outside the box than we ever did. So it is amazing to watch them develop. It's also dangerous to a degree. Because there's that, they love to jump into that fire, right on the edge of it, just like we did, but it was a little different when we were young. We jumped to the fire a little bit different. So with technology nowadays, they can get a little bit closer, closer to it, to see how things really go. So they have different ways to approach it. So be honest with your kids, be upfront with them, discuss it with them. But at the same time, if you're going to restrict it, understand that that restriction is going to put levels of frustration on them to where they're going to try to find other outlets. And they will try to find other outlets. So try to work with them the best you can. I'm not saying, hey, let them go rampant with the internet. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is understand that there's a level there. I've got a supervisor who gave his kids cell phones when they first were able to get phones. And unbeknownstly to them, he put some apps on there to keep track of what they were doing. 4 hours later, both of the kids lost their phones. Okay? That quick, right? After 4 hours, they lost them. But you know what? He gave them an option, right? He didn't just say, all right, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. So he trusted them enough to say, I'm not going to tell them what I'm doing. I want them to go out here and explore the world on their own, and I want to see where it takes them. All right? 4 hours later, he saw where it took them. But then they learned, okay, you know what? Next time when I get my phones back, maybe I should do that kind of stuff. So you've got to give them some leeway and work with them a little bit. To say Snapchat is wrong, I want to stand here and say, I wouldn't let my kids do it. Okay, what's the purpose? There's a reason why there's a picture there that gets sent and it disappears. There's a reason why. But to sit here and tell you that you have to make the same decision, that's up to you. But I know what I would do. I would be very careful what apps I put in my kids. Okay? Snapchat is one that we really watch for, with that kind of stuff. There's other stuff out there that we look at too when it comes to this. Instagram, I know it seems crazy enough. A lot of parents have Instagram, Facebook, things like that. Y'all, YouTube. The amount of people we've caught just uploading child pornography to YouTube is crazy. You think anybody can get access to that? They do it. They do it, right? Same with the kids out there. They post stuff that they don't really necessarily know is wrong, but then they do it, and we call them up and say, hey, we've got to come talk to your kid. We've got to talk to you about this image that was uploaded to YouTube, or was uploaded to Instagram. I didn't think that was child pornography. Well, it is, right? So we have to go talk to them. Now, one image versus some people that we had one recently, 2,600 images. There's a problem there compared to one image, right? There's a big issue there. Somebody's got 2,600 images. We arrested someone last year that had 19,000. He was 13 years of age, he's now in his 40s. He started collecting when he was 13. So, to show you how long it took us to catch him, imagine some of the ones that we don't get to that point, okay? So it's a little scary when it comes to that stuff. But the people that are out there that do it all, they are predators when they come down to it. They get an opportunity, they're going to take a chance at it. to sit here and tell you the old concept of stranger danger, everybody's heard that, right? Like, if you see a stranger, run from them. Y'all, the majority of people we deal with, they're not strangers. They know them. Okay? They're family members. Okay? They're a distant cousin. They're an uncle. They're a grandparent sometimes. Okay? That's why you got to be so diligent with your kids, but don't over push them either. Don't constantly like, when you were with Johnny yesterday, was he doing something? Like, your kids are smart, y'all. They'll come to you and they'll tell you, I don't feel right about this because you raised me to know, hey, if I'm alone with someone, that's kind of weird for me to be with that person. Okay? I should not be alone with that person. So trust your kids to that degree. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with asking those questions. Hey, tell me what's been wrong. Why are you so reserved today compared to yesterday? You went over with your friend Becky yesterday. Why are you so reserved from coming back to her house? Ask those questions. Don't just say, well, she'll tell me when she's ready. You know your kids. If they're acting strange, there's a reason why they're acting strange. And talk to them. Ask them questions. But at the same time, don't try so hard that they become reserved from you because they're scared to tell you that. Let them know, look, I'm just here. I'm here because I care about you. I'm not here because I'm trying to get you in trouble. Because a lot of these younger kids, they get that. They'll get people that'll pray on them and they'll say, if you tell your parents, I'll hurt you or them. And they believe them. They believe them because they don't know any better. So make sure that when you do talk to your kids about this stuff, that you say, look, I just want to know the truth. Okay? I'm here to protect you. I'm not here to get you in trouble. Okay? And let them understand that. If you push them to a degree where they don't feel like they can trust you with that information, like I said, don't lie to your kids. Once they learn that, they'll reserve, they'll go back, and they'll be very careful on what they do tell you. So when you do that, show them your frustration, show them that you're upset, but at the same time, show them that, hey, I'm upset because I'm scared. I'm not upset because I'm mad at you. I want you to tell me what's going on because I care about you. And that's what it comes down to. You're not there to be an overruling parent of stay off of social media. You're there because you want them to know that if there's a problem, come to me and talk to me. That's what I really try to sell most parents on is, listen, make sure your kids know they can come talk to you, but they're not afraid to talk to you. Because we get parents that are like, if I find out that if you were doing this, this is what's going to happen to you. So when they do it once or twice, and they're at their buddy's house or their buddy's doing it, they're afraid to come tell you because they're afraid you're going to get mad at them. The reality, what you need to do is just say, you know what? People make mistakes. You made a mistake, but I'd rather you tell me the truth and let's work this out. Yeah, you're going to get in trouble. Okay, it happens. You're going to get punished in the long scheme of things. But right now, let's deal with this issue. And then we'll worry about that later. I want to make sure you're safe when it comes down to it first. Because that's so important for our kids to know nowadays. Because they're in that, especially in the teenage years, they're trying to figure out who they can trust and who they believe is the person they can go to. Make sure they know that no matter what those barriers between you and them, because they're in a different generation, they can still trust you. And they're there for you. And you're there for them when it comes down to it. That's what really matters when it comes to dealing with this kind of stuff. So I kind of push that out there, y'all. I'm trying to give you some information about the internet, but what I want you to really understand is make sure those barriers, even though, because as parents, trust me, my dad, God love him, to this day, he'll call me and ask me to help him do stuff in his home. I'm like, Dad, this reminds me of that phone call you used to make about your PCR flash 12. It's the same conversation, right? You go up, push delete on your text messages, they'll all go away, and start over, okay? He still calls me and asks me about that stuff, okay? So we as older generations, we don't understand the technology that they do, okay? We don't. But you know what? That's okay. That's all right. Make sure they understand it. Open, willingly tell them that. I don't know what you know about this, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to learn. Just like the jewelry thing, right? I'm like, wow, that's information I never thought about because it's not really pertaining to me. But you as parents, those are things you have to think about. So be willing to learn a little bit. You've got cell phones, use them. Use them to your benefit too. Look this stuff up. And get on these accounts and look up what Jewelry does and things like that. So with the social media aspect, just the one thing I tell people is to stand up here and say these are the exact apps you need to watch for. That's hard to do because there's so many out there. The ones you really need to focus on though, Instagram and stuff happens out there. Y'all, the Minecraft stuff that goes online, eBay or Roblox for younger kids, it's like the Legos of the internet. When I was a kid, Legos were amazing. And now, kids are like, that's fine, I'll just play with them online. I'm like, just kind of defeat the purpose of it. But hey, it does it for them, okay? Y'all, there's still chat conversations going on these websites. That's what you really got to pay attention to is the chat logs. Because predators will get on those websites, they'll get on these games, these free games, and they'll convince the kids to send them stuff. And what they do is they start very subtle, they start very small with, hey, what's your first name? And the first name leads to the last name. And then the last name leads to an address or a city that they live in. And The next thing you know, they know all about that individual, and then it becomes a blackmail aspect. We see that from time to time. They get this, if you don't do this for me, here's what I'm going to do to you. Right? But they'll send one image. They'll convince this kid to send one image, and they'll be, if you don't send more, I'm going to send this picture to your mom and dad. Or I'm going to send this to your friends at school. Or from there on, it becomes a blackmail machine. It just takes that one image. So that's why when it comes to these chats, be very careful who your kids are talking to on the internet. Even if they're in an online thing where you don't think that their name's not associated with it or anything, y'all, they will find ways to do it. They'll do it over months, years even. They are in no hurry because they have been there planning this for as long as they can. They may have 7 kids in the running at one time. The newest one is simple as, like I said, trying to get a first name. And they'll start very basic, and they'll take all the time they want to get all this information from you. So don't think that as long as my kid's on the internet once every week, it's probably not going to be a big deal. Trust me, they'll wait. They will wait it out. They're in no hurry because that game is half the fun for them. That pace, they enjoy that aspect of it. Because they're, again, the predators. Just like the animals in the animal kingdom, they take their time when they stalk their prey. They're not in a rush. They take their time and wait for the right opportunity. So when it comes down to it, understand that it's not going to be a right away aspect. It's going to take time. They're going to take their time. So I want to give y'all some time to ask questions and stuff like that. Please refer to the website with this kind of stuff. I want to give y'all a few minutes to ask questions because I know we're kind of time crunching here. Any kind of questions y'all have out there that I can't help you with? Little kids, I mean, that's what I'm here for. I just talk too much and something, any questions? Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with apps.
Yeah.
There are apps designed by talk about that.
They are, we hear of there's different calculator app, is that, you heard of that one before? Okay. There's one app out there, the big one is always called the calculator app. If you look on a phone, it looks like a calculator. You click on it, it'll pop up a password. You have to put in the password to get in. It actually is hiding another app, like a chat app, or it's hiding a box of apps where there's different apps on there, where they go to Snapchat and all that other stuff. The best thing for you to do, especially like iPhones, is just every once in a while, I hate to be this way, but, hey, you're paying the phone bill, right? So that's my phone. Take that phone and just start clicking on apps and see where it takes you. If it doesn't take you to where it looks like it's taking you, there's a problem there, okay? So with Apple phones, those are usually pretty simple. Password protect the apps that they can download. I know that some parents do that, where even free apps, there has to be a password limit before the app can be downloaded. As a parent, hey, you put your password in, now I want to download this app, Mom, I want to download this app. Okay, bring it to me, let me see it, pull up the app, you can read about it, and then you can put your password in and let it download that way. So that's a great way to do it. Android phones, it's a little bit more difficult because it's easier for them to find ways around. Android phones, y'all, they can be very difficult to deal with if you're not used to it compared to Apple phones. Most parents like Apple phones because why? They're simple. You download an app, it's an app, right? Well, Android phones, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. So if your kids are playing with Android phones, if you buy the Android phones, you need to have somebody look at that and help you kind of guide you through those from time to time, and those kind of things, because the way they can do with them. But still at the same time, sit there and click through those apps and go through everything else. It's not going to hurt. Take 10 minutes out of your night to do that. It's just like the principal was talking about up here. He said that he has changed his way of doing things since he became at the school, going into the bathrooms. I love that. I love to hear that stuff because he's gone out of his way to do something new. As parents, you're going to have to do that too. Because like you said, it's a cooperative effort. We have to work together to do that. And one of those things you're going to have to do is 10 minutes out of my day to look at all these apps. The same apps I looked through yesterday. You know what? That's good diligent parenting. Okay? That's showing your kids that you care about them and that you're looking out for them. Because when it comes down to it, 5 years from now, again, kid in middle school or high school, applying for a job, y'all, there are people who get paid a lot of money at colleges that when you apply, they take your packet and they look at your life from the time you were in kindergarten until now, and they look for a reason not to bring you to that school, because what they're trying to prevent is their school looking bad in the public eye. And that is because of something you posted 3 years ago that they look at and go, ooh, that's chancy for us to take a chance on that person. They may not do it based on one post, one picture that you put on the internet. And I'm telling y'all, it sounds crazy. They do that. They get paid a lot of money to make those decisions. So don't give them a reason. Don't give these schools a reason to want to turn you down. because everybody else is fighting for that same thing. They're all wanting to do that school. They get paid a lot of money to look at your social media, to look at your email accounts. They can literally take one of your email accounts and they can lock them into every email account you've ever owned. So they can see stuff from 10 years ago, an email address that you created 10 years ago. They can literally put them all together and spend nothing but days looking at every one of your email chains to see if there's a connection with one that is not associated with what they want in their school system. So that's why you gotta be so careful with that social media stuff. They can take an Instagram that attaches to a Snapchat you had 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and look at that and be like, ooh, that's it. Even the names that you use for your email addresses, y'all can pinpoint you out at the school and be like, we don't need that person because of something that they posted on the email or something. So yes, when it comes to those apps, y'all be very diligent in looking at those apps. But there are apps out there, like I said, they call it calculator app. That's the big one. Where it looks like one app, it's literally something else. So, good question. Any other questions? Thank y'all very much. I'm sorry I took up too much of your time.
One thing I would add to that conversation, I love what Mr. Campbell said about having a relationship with your child. Folks, what we see here at the school level is a lot of kids who love to put bad things on about other kids. When they're mad on them, they post it on social media. Oftentimes we see a group of students that will gang up on another student. And if that's in a classroom or the cafeteria, then our teachers and principals can see that and they can address that. We can't see it. You can't see it as a parent. A lot of times kids are ashamed. They don't want to tell somebody that they're being singled out or picked on. So knowing your kid, having access to their social media, and as politely as you can get them to understand you need to be a part of that, I think it's important. We have kids that are very depressed and very anxious because they're followed around each day by that social media presence and negativity. And it's just another way kind of for kids to detach themselves and pick on other kids. It's not a good thing. So be aware of that. We talk a lot about being a good digital citizen. I don't know if you've ever heard that. There's good digital citizenship resources on the handouts we've given you and what Mr. Campbell talked about. So go visit that when you got some time and try to do a good job. I know you guys are wanting to do a good job with your kids, but talking about don't treat somebody differently online than you would treat them in person. You need to be nice. We need to be polite. We need to lift other people up, not put them down. But when you're sitting there with that phone, it's a lot easier to say something mean. You've done it, don't lie. I know you put something in an email you wouldn't have said to somebody's face. I've done it, you've done it. We've got to think about that in terms of digital citizenship. And are we really going to have an online presence that matches who we are in the real world? Until we can get students and kids to understand you're viewed in that light when you're online, it's going to be tough. So talk to your kids about digital citizenship, about being a good person online, and about staying away from some of those things. Now, Mr. Campbell, I hope did a good job of scaring you to death about the people that are out there. If you've never heard of the dark web, look that up. Talk about the dark web. There's all kinds of parent sites out there that will tell you the apps you need to be aware of. Snapchat has a feature on it where you can hide pictures and hide different things where people can't get to them. So understand, doing the due diligence as a parent, you're going to have to do that. I got rudely talked to because I had a parent whose child was constantly getting bullied over the cell phone. And A, the parent didn't know that her kid was sending stuff right back. And B, when I made the suggestion, well, why don't you take the phone away? Take the source of that bullying, of that angst, of that anxiety, take the phone away. Well, I can't do that. I need them to have the phone because it's convenient for me. I've seen tons of parents hand their kids a phone so they can play and get out of their hair. And those are the kinds of things that we need to start thinking about and avoiding if we can. We need to have real conversations. That leads me into our next conversation. One of the scariest things for any administrator, any teacher, any parent really is realizing that your child, somebody that you care about and love, is not doing well with regards to their mental health or their mental well-being. And it's something that we've had to spend a lot more time and focus on. I don't know what it is about our society, if we're all too busy, if we're all too detached, if we are communicating over electronic devices too much, if we're giving the kids too much screen time and not enough together time. But the old tribal, community-based way of raising kids is going by the wayside. And what's happening is I think our students and our young people feel a lot more detached. They feel like people don't care about them. Everything's kind of superficial. And when that happens, even a well-adjusted young man or woman can really feel situational depression or get really anxious or have issues being social and being around peers. So we're seeing more than ever students who are being referred for suicidal ideations, who talk about wanting to hurt other people, wanting to hurt themselves. We see a lot of conversation out there about just general, I don't know what to do. I feel bad, I'm anxious, I don't like what's going on in my life, but I don't know what to do about it. And so schools, unfortunately or fortunately, have become, and in a lot of cases, the de facto mental health services of our young people. And we don't have the resources. I can tell you that right now. If you want to leave here and do something for Aaron Gray, here's what you can do. Call every legislator you can and tell them that we don't get enough resources for mental health in our schools. And our kids are coming to us anxious, they're coming to us detached, they're coming to us scared, and a lot of times we have very few resources to deal with that. But we do have a great partner in Blue Ridge Health, and we certainly appreciate Linda Davidson being here. She is the director for behavioral health at Blue Ridge, a big part of our school-based health center at Polk County Middle School, and she's here to talk to us tonight about mental health and well-being.
So hi, I'm Linda Davidson. I am a family nurse practitioner and a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and I'm the medical director of behavioral health at Blue Ridge Health. Blue Ridge Health is an integrated community healthcare center, so that means that we can offer medical, dental, behavioral health, and nutritional services all under one roof as a wraparound in a community. It's designated as a patient-centered medical home, which means that a person can enroll with us and get all their services there. And if it's a service we cannot provide, we collaborate with our community resources, and we will refer out to other people. Our mission is to provide quality health care that's accessible and affordable for all. So what that means is if you have Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, or no insurance at all, you can still come to us and we will serve you, and we'll happily do that. We do have a sliding fee scale, which means that based on your income, we can have the fees go from one rate to another rate. But even if you can't pay that, we will still see you and you can pay it as you go. Funding comes from the federal government, state contributions, grants, donations, and patient revenues. So that's just a little bit about us. And what I'm really here to talk to you about tonight is why do we even need behavioral health in schools? What are the signs you should be looking for in the kids to demonstrate that they're looking for help or need help? And then once you are aware of that, what do you do next? Last year, we received a grant from the Department of Public Instruction, and the intent was to provide routine, emergent, and urgent care in the schools for behavioral health. So we placed an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker, in the middle school, and we placed a crisis LCSW in the high school. And that was a brand new program. I don't think it was done elsewhere in the nation, where the crisis worker could go out to any school that needed them at any minute's notice. And then that person could follow up with family care, family therapy, home-based visits, whatever was needed to provide services to that child. They're very important, the LCSWs and licensed professional counselors in our school-based health system. In 1 year period of time, our crisis counselor provided over 390 counseling visits. And then, I just got this number today, but there were 665 encounters, meaning each visit, in the middle school. So in 1 year, we provided almost 1,000 visits. And that was just with 2 people. Imagine what we could do with more. That grant has now run out. But our dedication is with the Polk County Schools, and we are continuing our behavioral health services in the schools. So why do we even need behavioral health in the schools? And I'm sure many of you remember, as I do, being in school, we didn't have counselors. We had a guidance counselor. That counselor helped us decide what we wanted to do when we grew up. Of course, many of us never found out what we wanted to do when we keep reinventing ourselves. But one of the very important reasons we have behavioral health in school is because of something called trauma. And trauma has to do with those events that happen, especially to children, and they also happen to adults, that really shape our world up, make no logic to what's happening, and our brain just can't put any logical order in why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. And in 1995 to 1997, there was a very important study done by Kaiser Permanente, which is called the ACEs study, which stood for Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And that study revealed that children with childhood trauma had a significantly greater medical and behavioral health needs when they grew older. And that was done in a community where there were a lot of resources for medical and behavioral health. It was an affluent community. It was not a study that was done in rural communities or communities that didn't have a lot of services. So I expect that that number would have been even greater. This, which is I know coming up, there it is. This was what came out of that study, and it was a very important diagram. It showed that the adverse childhood experiences were occurring on the bottom level, and the more you have, the worse effect it had, especially if they were coming from somebody that the child knew, and it was coming in quick order. But it disrupted what is called neurodevelopment. Now, neurodevelopment has to do, here's a little pathophysiology. The brain has a frontal lobe, and that's where our functioning comes from. When something happens to us as children, or even as adults, it gets sort of stagnated and disrupted, and it can't really make sense that this is happening here, and this is where we are. There's like a disconnect that happens. And what that does is cause a lot of emotional dysregulation, meaning the inability to be resilient, to respond to it, to go on in life and make sense of things, which causes really a lot of social and emotional cognitive decline and impairment. That then leads to those high-risk behaviors, like smoking, drinking, opioids, vaping. And then that leads to different kinds of diseases. We see HIV, hepatitis C, and then an early death. So whereas in behavioral health, the focus has always been on treatment, it's no longer that way. Now we know we need to catch kids early so that what's happening here at 3 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, 16 years old, doesn't lead to an adult at 40, 50, and 60 who are seeking behavioral health services. There's a lot of other reasons why behavioral health is needed in schools. There's a lot of anxiety, depression, people living in homes or social environments that are being abused by substances. Just because they are not taking the substance, it doesn't mean that they're not affected by what's happening in the household. People around them. They're struggling from pressures from social media, which we've heard about already, and a lot of pressures from peers and society. The effect of behavioral health issues in their caregivers. So a caregiver, let's say, who's dealing with their own depression or trauma or anxiety that has been left untreated, and they are not dealing with it appropriately or having resilience to actually make a living or give love and care to that child then struggles and has those behavioral health issues impact their life. That is a form of trauma for them. And there's a growing epidemic of suicidal and homicidal behavior in our communities and schools. Just today, right before I came here, I was watching the news, and just this week there were 2 schools that had violence in it. Gun violence, knife violence. It's all over, and our kids are seeing this. And these are just a few reasons why this is so needed in our schools. Adjustment disorders, people who maybe move to a new area and they don't make friends easily. That, for them, that adjustment disorder is a trauma for them. So these are the things that our counselors are actually seeing in schools. These are the things that diagnoses, I did a scan of what diagnosis we're seeing. Trauma is number 1. Substance use disorders usually goes along with trauma. It's not disconnected. None of this is disconnected. It's all connected to each other. Anxiety and depression, adjustment disorders, anger. Remember we talked about that dysregulation of the frontal lobe, that people can't control their own behavior? That comes out as anger when they're older because they don't know how to manage that behavior. They don't have the skills and coping skills because trauma, when they were younger, did not give them the ability to process that appropriately. Social media is off the chart. Bullying and sexting. Sexting is where you're basically in a sexual relationship through social media. And we do see that. We hear about, my boyfriend took a picture of me and then he sent it to 10 of his friends and now it's all over and I'm being bullied by my friends. Who are their friends? They weren't bullied, they were their friends. But we are seeing that, and unfortunately, we are seeing suicidal and homicidal ideation, both of those things. And it's not just Polk. We are in a number of different schools. And what I'm talking to you about here in Polk is the same thing we're seeing in Henderson and the other schools that we're in. So what are you looking for? How do you know that this is actually happening to the child you're caring for? The big telltale is a discrete change in behavior. If you say to yourself, I don't know what's going on, but something's going on, you're right, it is. And you need to be able to speak to that child and find out what that is. Let them know you're aware that something's happening, ask them to talk to you about it, and if not you, talk to somebody about it. If the child is keeping to themselves more than usual, you have to ask what and change in that behavior. Increased sadness, crying, and irritability. Lashing out at you. Mood fluctuations. One day, happy as could be, the next day I don't even want to get out of bed and go to school. Excessive fear, worry, and anxiety. Anxiety has become the #1 social epidemic issue in behavioral health in our nation. So much so that Time magazine in 1 month had an entire issue devoted to anxiety in our children. Children are very anxious. We think a lot of it has to do with pressures from peers, and a lot has to do with social media. And if you see your child is having some confused thinking, like previously they were able to go along in their life and make the decisions, and then all of a sudden they're just unable to really make a decision, that is something you need to address and look at. Changes in the eating or sleeping patterns. Sleeping more, sleeping less. Eating more, eating less. Anger again, very strong feelings of anger. Being too private about computer use. If you see your kid closing the computer every time you come, or knock on the door and there's a lull before they say come in, I open the door jar, then you want to know what's going on with that computer and ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Show me what you were just looking at. I'm interested to know what you're doing. Hearing or seeing things that are not there. The inability to cope with daily problems, something that you think they shouldn't have a really big issue about, and it's being blown out of proportion. There's something underlying that. Don't be afraid to ask what's going on. And social withdrawal. I don't want to play in sports anymore. I don't want to go out to a dance. I don't want to go to the movies. I don't want to be with my family. Anything like that, you need to find out what's going on. Thoughts of suicide. Now, I will say this very strongly. If someone says to you, children or adults, I'm thinking about killing myself, take that very seriously. Even if it's something you've heard over and over, take it seriously. Find out what's going on. Do you have a plan? Do you have an intent? Let's get you some help now, because you're important to me. Harmful acts against other living things, getting pleasure out of hurting other people, other animals, even insects. Denial of obvious problems. There's a definite problem there. You know that they come home drunk, smelling of alcohol, and they deny they were drinking. Unexplained physical problems. So those are things like headaches, stomach aches, neck pains. Stomach aches and headaches are the 2 main ones. And sometimes there's a reason for them, a real medical reason. You have to check it out. But if it's checked out and there's nothing there and it's consistent and persistent, something's going on. In somatic therapy, which has to do with dealing with trauma, we talk about how the body holds on to all of the things that happen to us in our lives. Because before your brain can make sense of anything, your body is reacting to it and feeling it. Sometimes I'll deal with somebody with trauma and they say, I feel it here in my gut. And that's something that they complained about multiple times. I had stomach aches throughout my life. Was it stomach aches? Well, it was. But it was due to some trauma. And once we can release that trauma or work on that, sometimes through somatic therapy, we experience getting rid of it, or understanding it and being aware of it, those things can go away. Works wonders for back pains. I've seen that happening a lot. If you notice money or objects are missing from your house, something's going on. You didn't misplace, maybe you misplaced it once or twice. But if it's 5 and 6 times in a month, it's probably not you. Things are probably disappearing. So those are just the kinds of things you can look out for. And you can find a lot of this information on the internet, but be careful on what sites you go to. These are the main ones that we see in clinical practice. So now that you know what to look for, what do you do with that information? Where do you turn? The first thing is to acknowledge there is a problem. Acknowledge it to yourself, and try to have the person you're dealing with it acknowledge it to themselves too. Because awareness is the first step in recovery from any of this. You can contact your school counselor. If they can't help you, they know how to contact us. We have Ashley Bartow here at the Blue Ridge School-Based Health Practice, and you just request you want your child seen. We'll be happy to see them. Maybe there's nothing going on, or maybe it's just the normal 10, 13-year-old stuff going on. But let somebody make that decision with your kid about that. And don't ever hesitate to call the Mobile Crisis Center in emergency. That number is here. And actually, I have a list of resources that are going to be here for you to take. It has all of the resources in the Polk community, everything for children, adult services, recovery services, and even some additional things like homelessness and food shelves. It's by no means complete, but at least it's somewhere to start. And seek guidance from your house of worship. That's a great place to go to if your child's having a problem. Sometimes it's you that need the guidance and not how to deal with what you are facing. And we also, adults are welcome to come to our Blue Ridge Health Clinic, which is on Wilford Street. We have 2 very good LCSWs there who work with adults. So we've got adults covered, we've got children covered. I think it's also important to look inside of yourself and ask yourself, maybe my kid has a problem, but maybe I also have a problem. And maybe I have to deal with it on 2 levels. If so, give us a call. We're happy to help you. So the good news is that we can make a difference. I have seen lives change. I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't believe that people can change and become everything that God intended them to become. And that help is here, and it's here in your community. So please don't hesitate to call us. So, any questions for you? I'm happy to talk about anything behavioral health. Is it good?
Warm down.
Well, you had some great presentation. That was
The resources, you should have those resource sheets that go ahead at the end of the
I don't want to keep you after class. You've been diligent students and stayed for a long time. I do want you to know that there are resources available for you, things we talked about, or even thinking about doing some follow-up in the spring. We might have one night dedicated to vaping, one night dedicated to social media internet, one night dedicated to mental health and well-being. We could obviously go really deep into these topics. Our goal tonight, again, was to make you aware that these issues are out there, to let you know kind of what we're facing on the front lines here at the school level, and also to get you some resources and access. My guess is, like most of the things we do in this vein, the people here probably don't need to be here. You're here because you care about your kids, you're probably very focused and diligent, that's why you want to know all the things about them. So please spread the word. If you see community members out there who are struggling, if you hear other students or your child says, hey, I've got a friend who's really struggling with X, Y, Z, get them connected to these resources. I've gone away from being, that's your private business or that secret or whatever. When it comes down to a child's life, I just don't think we need to be taking any chances. We had a young man commit suicide at the early college last year. And I can tell you that those kids and those teachers and faculty at that school will never forget it within the rest of their lives. Be with that family the rest of their lives. And who knows, we could have intervened or we could have done something differently. So I hate to be dramatic. I'm just not a dramatic person. But honestly, that's what's at stake sometimes. We want to make sure that we're here taking care of kids and we're part of the community. So we don't have all the answers, but we definitely want to be your partners as we go forward. And I certainly appreciate you being here tonight. If you have any questions, let us know. Follow up. Maybe you'll see yourself on YouTube. I'm just joking. We didn't film you guys. It came over the top of your head, but do let people know if you post it on